Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, the second part thereof for the 7th of December 2025. I'm going to give you a military aid news update, and my goodness, there's a lot to talk about. Most of it, or not most of it, a large proportion of this video is going to be spent talking about funding actually, because there's a number of different arguments concerning what's going on with the funding. It appears that Viktor Orban has come out and said his piece and put an obstruction in place. He's vetoed an alternative to the funding, the frozen Russian assets funding, because what that particular alternative can be vetoed because it requires a unanimity of votes. But I don't think other versions do. But Belgium appears to be being very difficult with regard to those frozen Russian assets. So it's all looking rather controversial. We're going to get into that. I just want to remind ourselves of the situation at the moment, because I know this is a military aid video, but I can't help but think almost all the time at the moment about how much of a groundbreaking is the wrong word, how much of an inflection point this is right at the moment in terms of international politics. We are living in a period of a potential massive schism in the rules-based order, I think, in the world as we know it, with regard to what's going on. I was just reading before I came on that Emmanuel Macron, who's just been in China, said, look, there's a massive trade imbalance between China and the EU, and we're really hurting at the moment with the way that trade imbalance is going. So we might be looking at dealing with that with, I don't know, massive tariffs. And I predicted some time back that when the US started putting on the huge tariffs and started a trade war with everyone, this would just lead to everyone else putting tariffs on, because, you know, if a really big player becomes protectionist, then it actually motivates other players to be protectionist, and we're going to just have a massive trade war. And that's looking like that might be around the corner, as well as, of course, the schism among the historical allies, the alliance of kind of NATO, the US, Europe. It's looking really bad at the moment. And the Trump, so just to actually let's look at this very, very quickly before we get onto military aid. I know this is a bit geopolitical, etc., but hey, you're here, let's chat. You've got now mainstream media articles coming out saying Kremlin hails Trump's national security strategy as aligned with Russia's vision. I mean, wow. So the size and scope of what is happening right now is like, you know, 8, 9 on the Richter scale in terms of geopolitical earthquakes. I don't know, they don't use a Richter scale anymore, whatever the new scale is. It is just huge what is going on, and it's looking very, very shaky. We have, and then you know, add to that Elon Musk and tech oligarchs wanting to wage war on Europe, on the EU. It is huge. Dmitry Peskov, the updated US national security strategy largely corresponds to the vision of the Russian Federation. Wow. Twitter in the past 48 hours, says Michael Weiss, has been like watching a remedial version of Spectre, so the kind of James Bond conglomeration of evildoers, convening a meeting in real time. Viktor Orban sounding off about Russia, Kirill Dmitriev sounding off about the EU, Kirill Dmitriev joining in, and this is all kind of on the behest of Elon Musk. And so we are going through a stage right now that is, not to say a little bit worrying, and I'm genuinely perturbed. And I'm really, really, really hoping that the EU actually just stands tall and is strong. But the problem with the EU is that you have Viktor Orban, Robert Fico, and now you've got the new government in Czechia. And then you've got AFD, Rassemblement National, Reform UK, all these other, I know we're not in the EU, but all these other anti-EU, anti-alliance nationalist parties gaining momentum. It's a really, truly worrying time. And if you understand that the Trump administration wants an isolationist, autocratic, or sees the US in terms of, you know, this autocratic vision, isolationist vision, and that's what Elon Musk wants, and that's what people that want to tear apart the EU want. This is to the benefit of Russia, to the benefit of China, and actually not to the benefit of the US. By the way, I think it brings about a far weaker United States. It really will, and yeah, I'm super perturbed at the moment. Anyway, that's me just starting off with really positive words. Okay, it is. Yeah, I essentially this, as Dalai Lama says, looks like we live in truly historic times, indeed. Okay, let's go and get stuck into what is going on, and there is a lot going on. So I'm just going to bring you this graph. This is for your visual pleasure. It's just a reminder that over the last year, the Trump administration, that tiny little blue bit is US aid, I guess, prior to January the 20th. The big spike here was Biden trying to offload loads of assistance to Ukraine, knowing that he had lost the election. And from November the 5th onwards, they were trying to just get as much aid to Ukraine as possible, knowing that this would happen. And indeed, that did happen, which is not a lot of aid from the US to Ukraine. Now, we have had Christopher Landau, the Deputy Secretary of State, saying, hey, yeah, let's look at the EU then. And oh my goodness, you guys have been buying way more Russian hydrocarbons than you've been paying Russia more for stuff than you've been paying Ukraine in assistance. So don't come to the US and start whinging. And that is a nuanced argument, and the EU is trying to wean itself off dependence on Russian hydrocarbons. So it doesn't help when your own president gives the two worst culprits there, Slovakia and Hungary, year-long exemptions, from having to wean themselves off Russian hydrocarbons. So it's really deeply frustrating at the moment. Oh well, that's just to remind you of where we are at with regard to sort of relative assistance to Ukraine. Right, NATO countries intend to spend $1 billion each month next year on purchasing weapons from the US for Ukraine. So there's an intention, says Mark Rutte, to spend essentially 12 billion euros next year, 1 billion euros a month, assisting Ukraine by buying stuff off the United States. I mean, the US then get to just essentially profiteer off the war by saying, well, we're not going to give anything. I mean, look at what we're doing down here in the bottom right. We're not going to do any giving of aid to Ukraine, but we're totally happy to sell the crap out of this aid to, we are going to sell more of this aid, as much as we possibly can, to make a pretty penny out of the Ukraine war. And it just leaves a rather sour taste in my mouth. Norway increases its contribution to Pearl. This is the initiative to buy from the US, another $500 million for American weapons for Ukraine. NATO reminds that their goal is a monthly funding of $1 billion. Purchases are not limited, though. If contributions increase, Ukraine will be able to receive more weapons. But again, all of this will be coming from the United States, funded by Europe. 4 more NATO countries will finance American weapons packages for Ukraine. So that's Norway, 500 million euros, Netherlands, 250 million, Canada, 200 million euros, Germany, 200 million. And actually, I think Poland also has joined in with some more. So all the this is the NATO meeting this is going back a few days, December the 3rd. 5 countries confirmed allocation of 1 billion in support then, or over $1 billion. As Tim White here says, it's all being used to purchase weapons through Pearl as the US continues to profit amid the misery. So again, it leaves many of us a little bit uneasy. Slovenia apparently will also join the Pearl program. By the end of the year, will allocate about 43 million euros to strengthen Ukraine's air defense. This is a quote, "This is a truly important initiative to strengthen our capabilities, primarily in the field of air defense," Denis Mihal, the defense minister, has noted. On the other hand, Italy, as I told you previously, has suspended participation in the Pearl program to purchase US weapons for Ukraine. They say that actually they are hopeful that there will be a ceasefire that should mean that they don't need to support Ukraine with buying weapons from the US. Italy said it currently considers participating in NATO's program to purchase US weapons for Ukraine premature amid ongoing talks of a possible ceasefire. And then we come on to Germany. German aid to Ukraine says after Germany had already announced 2 investments via the Pearl mechanism, 500 million, and then another $500 million and 150 plus million euros. Germany's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vadeful, today pledged, and by today I mean December the 3rd, a further 200 million. That was what was counted on a previous post, which are to be allocated for the benefit of Ukraine through 2 Pearl packages. In addition, Germany will contribute a further 25 million to the CAP framework. So the CAP framework is, remind me, it's an I've got it here, comprehensive assistance package, and that seeks to supply Ukrainian troops with winter gear and medical support. So that's a further 25 million to the CAP framework that will ensure the procurement of winter gear and medical care for Ukrainian soldiers currently fighting on the front line. And then we have German Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy announcing in a press release that Germany is going to contribute another 100 million euros to Ukraine, to the Ukraine Energy Support Fund via the German state-owned development bank KfW for the repair of damaged Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Goodness me, that'll be needed. Together with the funds already paid out and previously pledged, Germany's contribution now stands at around 550 million euros, he said back then, which corresponds to approximately 42% of the funds pledged by all nations worldwide. Germany is really coming up with the goods. And in fact, the Bundestag has approved their budget with a record support package or record support levels for Ukraine. Defense spending would increase to approximately 108 billion euros. I guess that's the total over the course of the war. Would that be right? I mean, that's an incredible amount, a record high since the end of the Cold War. Ukraine will receive 11.5 billion euros for artillery, drones, armored vehicles, and other military equipment. This is the largest package for Ukraine since the beginning of the Russian invasion, according to Der Spiegel there. So again, Germany, honestly, doing an absolute solid one for Ukraine. Excellent. Right, Canada's military support for Ukraine will grow by $200 million, and we sort of saw that earlier under NATO's US weapons procurement program, with additional tens of millions allocated for fuel, medical supply, and communications. So awesome stuff there from Canada. They're providing an additional 35 million to, again, the CAP for Ukraine. So that's for winter gear and whatnot and medical aid. Brings the combined contributions to $180 million is the claim there. Canadian funding has supported Ukraine's communication systems, medical equipment, logistics, and engineering tools, generators, and power systems. So Canada doing a solid one too. And then we have the whinging that despite all of that money going to the United States from Europe, and despite Europe obviously desiring that their taxpayers' money goes to European business rather than American business, which is why their defense strategy has put in place 65% of all defense procurement should come, for European nations, should come from European businesses. The US Deputy Secretary of State, Christopher Landau, who sounds to me like an absolute tool, on Wednesday slammed European NATO allies for prioritizing their own defense industry over American arms suppliers, according to 3 NATO diplomats. So he's gone to town on Europe saying you need to be buying way more American stuff. And it's like, well, okay, can we just say you need to be buying more European stuff? How about that? How about that, Landau? Just honestly. And actually, if you look at his Twitter feed, the last few days has been a torrent of abuse against Europe, and again it goes back to this real pivotal moment now of the national security strategy, showing that the US has turned the tables and has now sees Europe as a competitor and kind of as an adversary, and it doesn't see Russia in the same light at all. Absolutely incredible. So as Doug Klein here says, what did we think was going to happen? Just 2 weeks ago, the United States threatened to withhold arms sales for Ukraine that were already paid for by European allies. After a year of policy like that, it's hard to make the case that the United States is reliable. And that's coming from Doug Klein, so Deputy Director for Policy and Strategy. So yeah, top US official berates Europe over cutting American industry out of defense buildup. Now, Denmark will allocate almost half as much. So that's all, fairly good stuff. People, nations coming out saying we're going to give a lot to Ukraine. Denmark's come out and said that they will give almost half as much financial assistance to Ukraine next year as they did this year. In particular, its amount will decrease to almost $1.5 billion instead of almost $2.6 billion. That's according to RBC Ukraine. So I don't know whether that's something that can be added to, a bit like what the Germans do, where they say we're going to give 7 billion this year, and everyone goes, oh, they cut everything in half, but then they keep adding to it, so it gets up to the level it was last year, or even goes beyond. And so I don't know if that's what Denmark might do. Who knows? Energy supply, infrastructure repair, and healthcare will receive $116 million from Sweden in a new package aimed at helping Ukraine survive the winter and prepare for future ones. So Sweden coming up with the goods. And in fact, Sweden doing quite an interesting thing. They're going to cut development aid to 5 countries to divert money to Ukraine. So at the moment, they are supporting, for example, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Mozambique, Liberia, and Bolivia, almost all in Africa, Bolivia in South America. They are now saying that actually we're going to phase that development money out, and we're going to use that money instead to support Ukraine closer to home, so on and so forth. So that sounds fairly sensible there, since there's only a finite amount of money, and I think Ukraine is one of the single most important conflicts, geopolitical needs for Europe to satisfactorily solve. UK Foreign Secretary, that's Yvette Cooper, has pledged an additional £10 million to support Ukraine's energy infrastructure. She said Putin wants to plunge Ukraine into darkness, and we will continue to work to switch the lights back on. So that's just in the area of energy there. And then Ireland will provide Ukraine with a €100 million package of non-lethal military aid. Since the invasion, Ireland has contributed over €340 million in financial support, including $166 million for non-lethal military aid, and an additional $25 million will go to Ukraine's energy infrastructure. And then we're going to get onto the big funding discussion. Okay, so all of that is fantastic in the main. Some bits are a bit like, oh, it could be, Denmark's maybe a bit worried. Belgium is pushing back against EU plans to use frozen Russian assets for Ukraine, warning it could bankrupt the country. Foreign Minister Prévost says handing over €185 billion held at Euroclear without solid guarantees exposes Belgium to risks. Quote, our concerns are legitimate, but we're not being heard. Prime Minister Bart De Wever has said. Now, I've gone through this a number of times, and there are some legitimate concerns for the Belgians, but also it does look like they are being very difficult. Now, that means that Europe should be trying its absolute utmost to make sure that Belgium is not singled out for risk in the event of any monies from Euroclear going to Ukraine. Politico reports that the European Commission is proposing a reparations loan of €165 billion for Ukraine using the cash value of frozen Russian assets held in Belgium. Reparations loan is part of a wider financial package worth up to €210 billion to keep Kyiv's finances afloat in the coming years. And European Commission has presented 2 financial solutions to support Ukraine 2026 to 2027. These are about attracting funds under EU budget guarantees and a new reparation loan that will use the profits on the frozen Russian assets of the central bank. The package consists of 5 legal proposals and includes a ban on the return of these assets to Russia, as well as mechanisms to protect EU countries and financial institutions from possible pressure from Russia. The EU plans to reach a political decision at the summit on December the 18th to 19th. So it's all about getting something agreed upon before December the 18th so it can be voted on. And there are certain things that need unanimous votes and certain things that need just a majority or a qualified majority. The European Commission has proposed using frozen Russian assets or alternatively borrowing to raise €90 billion for Ukraine. So that I'm reading lots of different ideas of what's going on, and it's difficult to know exactly what they're aiming for. But here is the idea to raise $90 billion for Ukraine to support its military and essential services. The plan, pitched as a reparations loan, aims to cover 2/3 of Kyiv's funding needs over the next 2 years. So that's a slightly lower iteration of what we just heard. And they'll present a legal proposal this week to use those frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine, according to Reuters. The plan centers on this, as mentioned, reparations loan. But then we hear that Hungary has vetoed the EU's Eurobond plan to fund Ukraine, blocking a potential fallback if efforts to tap frozen Russian assets fail. So the rejection, revealed during an ambassadors meeting, removes a key alternative as talks with Belgium, holder of most frozen Russian reserves, remains deadlocked. So Hungary, because the alternative only required a full unanimous vote, Hungary were just able to say, well, we're not going to vote for it, so that's vetoed. So one of these fallback last chance saloon options of some kind of bond funding for Ukraine, now that's plan B, can't be achieved. And many people are saying, well, plan A is looking pretty dodgy as well. So it could be that both plan A and plan B are screwed. Belgium on the one hand, Hungary on the other hand. And that would be desperate for Ukraine, because that's an absolute lifeline. Now, the UK, as I've hinted at before, appears to be trying to come to the rescue to some degree. Britain is considering unfreezing 10.7 billion in Russian assets to help cover Ukraine's financing needs. The Times has reported, as Kyiv faces a significant funding gap over the next 2 years. So this Krylo Shevchenko here said just today, while the EU is still debating how to use the frozen Russian assets, the UK is moving ahead, is ready to transfer its £8 billion share directly to Ukraine, and is pushing partners to unlock up to 100 billion in total for 2026 to 27. That amount could cover about 2/3 of Ukraine's funding needs in the coming years for defense or rebuilding. According to the Times, plan still needs final legal steps and coordination with the EU, Canada, and others, so it may take a few months. But then, other nations can also do similar things, like Canada, Japan, and part of what was being hinted at by the Times there, or by Shevchenko, talking about the Times article, is this idea that the UK is also brokering a deal between EU and other countries, including Canada, that could release 100 billion. So there are options still on the table. UK is trying to work really hard at it, also thinking about releasing its entire frozen Russian assets funding to Ukraine as a kind of last ditch effort to say, well, look, if you don't get the full amount from the EU based frozen assets, then we'll come up and throw you a bunch ourselves. Fingers crossed. So there you go. Now, boycott Belgian waffles. It might work. Who knows? Right. Hungary, lots will change in 2 to 3 months with the Hungarian elections. They're due to happen in, April time. I think you're going to see, and we've heard elements of this today and over the last 48 hours, you are probably going to see Viktor Orban threaten the electorate in Hungary with, if you vote for Peter Magyar, you will vote for us getting us involved in an actual kinetic war. And I think he's just going to, I think you'll find the war in Ukraine could become a political football in the upcoming elections there. So look, if you want to have huge expenditure supporting Ukraine, and if you want this and if you want that, then vote for Peter Magyar. But if you want us to, if you want me, Viktor Orban, to look after our own and to be a lot safer, etc., then vote for me. So I'm predicting that will probably be the approach from Viktor Orban. Okay, so let's now look at actual aid, like pieces of kit and whatnot, rather than funding more generally. Before we do so, I mean, this is good news and just shows you the difference between perception and reality, or the difference between, not quite perception and reality, but the difference between what the people think and what the Trump administration thinks. So this is the Reagan National Defense Survey, and not for the first time they've shown more favorable views towards Ukraine. So I don't know whether their methodology is different from other surveys, but anyway, on Thursday they released a survey that found that 64% of Americans favor sending lethal aid to support Kyiv's government, up 9 points from last year and the highest proportion since February 2022. Now, if this is like for like comparisons, then that is significant. So, it doesn't really matter what the methodology particularly is. If they're comparing a like survey to a like survey, they are showing amongst their selected individuals a shift of 9 points in favor of Ukraine. within the last year. And that is really, really big. So more Americans than ever want the US to send weapons to Ukraine, says a key defense survey, or so it finds. And that's a New York Post, the Murdoch-owned tabloid newspaper that is actually very pro-Ukrainian. Slightly more, 65% support giving Ukraine long-range cruise missiles, such as the Tomahawk, to allow strikes deep inside Russian territory, while 68% support selling American-made weapons to European allies who would then provide them to Ukraine. Unlike in 2024, majority of Republicans, 59%, support sending weapons to Ukraine to fight off Russia's invasion, up from 44% last year. So that's a positive shift of 15% among Republican voters. In other words, arguably Trump is out of step with what the electorate believes and what even his own base believes concerning support for Ukraine. 3/4 of Democrats support aiding Ukraine, up from 68% a year ago. So everyone across the board appears to favor the US supporting Ukraine more than they presently are. Okay, with that in mind, the Pentagon, we hear, was already finalizing plans to transfer the Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, but Trump blocked the supply. Remember what happened? Zelensky was going to go to the US, apparently to receive the news that they were going to be given Tomahawks by the US. And then Steve Witkoff, through Ushakov, said, you need to get Putin to phone up Trump, and he needs to say this to Trump. Putin phoned up Trump, said that to Trump, and then convinced Trump not to give Tomahawks. So you could essentially, I mean, it looks like it was actually going to happen, according to a former US ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. It was going to happen, but Trump blocked it, and he blocked it because of Putin phoning, and Putin phoned on behest of and with the advice from Steve Witkoff. Steve Witkoff is a Russian agent, one way or another, useful idiot or an actual agent. He is dangerous, he's incompetent, and he is fully acting in accordance with what Russia wants. Possibility of supplying these missiles, though, remains open even now, says William Taylor, by all accounts, but I don't know what the likelihood of that is. The United States intends to accelerate arms shipments. So this is kind of going against what we're hearing. They intend to accelerate arms shipments to Ukraine ahead of Christmas, while simultaneously encouraging NATO to shift towards Europe-led leadership by 2027. This might be to do with what I keep talking to you about, which there are two worldviews going on. You've got your basic military worldview of we know that Russian are the bad guys, and we've got all these stocks, and we need to logistically get them from A to B, and that's done by the military. And then you've got the political people like Christopher Landau, we just heard from. Even Marco Rubio now is going a bit off-piste. You've got J.D. Vance. You've got Elon Musk. You've got Stephen Miller. You've got Donald Trump. All those isolationist dingbats are basically pro-Russia, anti-Ukraine. And it might be that the military is getting on and just quietly trying to get stuff to Ukraine as quickly as they can to help Ukraine, because the Pentagon, like not the frothy people in certain positions around the Pentagon and the spokespeople and this person, that, but the actual, the people that do the heavy lifting in the Pentagon, they know what they need to do. And it could be that idea is reflected here with the Americans actually expediting arms to Ukraine that have been ordered, I presume, through the Pearl Initiative. Some things are still coming from USAI funding, which is orders over the years from US manufacturers to get stuff to Ukraine. US officials stress that despite Washington's wider strategic adjustments, support for Ukraine has not been disrupted and will expand in the coming weeks. Again, I think that's exactly what's going on. We hear that the Ukrainian F-16 fighter jets have received sighting containers that allow the integration of guided or laser-guided weapons, including the APKWS-2 missiles. So these are much cheaper missiles. Instead of spending $400,000 on a missile, they're spending, good news, another tool in the toolbox, $22,000 per APKWS-2 missile against an $80,000 Shahed. So these are max loads of 42 per F-16. So F-16s, if they can get these much cheaper, decent laser guided weapons, and it's the sighting containers that are able to be fixed now to the F-16s, and the F-16s have now got a more effective way and a more efficient way, a cheaper way of taking out these Shahed drones. They make it possible to shoot down drones in the most cost-effective way. That's really good news. Russian Shahids hide from radar by flying low, a clever trick, but you can't hide heat. A new photo suggests Ukraine's F-16s now have thermal sensor pods and 35,000 rockets instead of 400,000 missiles. So there's, I mean, it depends how much you find each of these missiles cost that you're comparing. You'll get different numbers. That's 35,000 as opposed to 22,000 we just saw, but whatever, cheaper and hopefully effective. So F-16s could become an even more useful tool defensively for the Ukrainians. I was reading about F-16s being adapted to carry the guided glide bombs that the Americans have provided for Ukraine. So the F-16s can also be used more offensively as well. I also read today, and this is a bit of an aside, the F-35A is looking at getting European Meteor missiles on board. So Lockheed Martin's been working with MBDA, is it, on the Meteor missile being compatible with the F-35A jet. So anyway, that's, I can't understand why I would know these things these days compared to what my life was 10 years ago, but there you go. So now we're on to my sort of thumbnail news piece. Max25 here, referencing ABC Australia, saying the Australian government is considering passing along its fleet of retiring Tiger helicopters to Ukraine as the US works to broker a peace deal in Moscow. It is expected that a significant funding boost from Canberra to Ukraine's war effort is imminent. That would be fantastic. Government considers offloading retiring Tiger helicopters to Ukraine. These are Eurocopter helicopters that are basically European built helicopters. Now Airbus, used to be Eurocopter, I think. Australia has how many? 22. The Army's fleet of 22 Tiger helicopters entered service in 2004. They are due to be fully withdrawn by 2028, though defense officials have indicated the timetable could be brought forward. Transition is already underway, with the first two Apache attack helicopters arriving from the US in October. So they're replacing them with American Apaches. These are, I don't know too much about the Tiger. The British didn't take them on. We took on Apaches. And I think Italy they were hoping Italy would take them on. They didn't either. But anyway, yeah, the Tiger ARH, the Australian version. So what does it have? Hellfire missiles, Ed's ground missiles. What else? Anyway, you know, you can go and look on Wikipedia what they do and what they're capable of. But they, yeah, it's already got on the Wikipedia article that in December 2025, it's reported the Australian government is in discussions with the Ukrainian government to gift the Tiger fleet to Ukraine. They take 2 crew. There are the stats for them. You can go and geek out on them if that's your bag. And those are the armaments that they can carry. So a whole range here. Spike, those are Spanish, the Spike are Israeli, but the Spanish Tiger copters carry them, and then you got, you know, Mistral, those are French. Anyway, so on and so forth. So the Ukrainians could get themselves on 22 of these helicopters, and that would be incredibly useful. Obviously, it's about training. You know, it's not like they'll suddenly be flying on the front lines within the next couple of weeks. I mean, it might take months and months and months and months, and maybe, you know, best part of a year to train yourselves on something like this. So this could be more of a long-term thing. How useful will they be, and, you know, so on and so forth. That's always a problem when you have a completely different helicopter. It's a completely different platform, rather than taking old Mi-8s, Mi-24s and whatnot. But that's really good news, and thank you, Australia, for thinking about doing that. Because remember, they had the other helicopters they end up burying in the desert. But I think there was a bit more of an issue with those helicopters, to be honest. And it would have required, yeah, a bit of an effort to get them up to scratch. Now, quite interesting, says the Dead District here. Turkey has secretly sold the Ukrainian army a whole bunch of stuff that's been found out by Russian hackers, by all accounts. So the Turkish have sold the Ukrainian army. It says sold here. I presume that is the case. 9 T-300 Katyga multiple launch rocket systems and almost 1,000 rockets for them. 24 T-155 Fertina self-propelled howitzers with almost 17,000 shells for them. 70 ATACMS missiles with a 165 kilometer range. Wow. 12 multiple launch rocket systems and other systems, according to Russian hackers. Yeah, interesting. That is potentially a fairly decent amount of kit, but as it mentions there, bought by the Ukrainians. Italy's VCC-1 armored personnel carriers have been spotted in the service of Ukrainian forces for the first time. That's good news. Now, these are essentially M113s, the old American APC that's been around since, I don't know, the Ice Age. They are upgraded versions of the original M113, so they've got a bit more. They've got a bit more armor on them. They've got more viewing points on them. Steel plate 6mm thick were added to the sides and front of the vehicle. Due to reduced internal space, the carrying capacity was reduced from 11 to 7 infantry, and so on and so forth. But anyway, that's what it essentially looks like, and the Ukrainians are getting their hands on. I can't remember how many they're getting the VCC ones from Italy, but that's good news. They may well be in Ukraine already. And then we have we move on to Germany. So we have German Aid to Ukraine here talking about the kind of unsung heroes of the war, not these either recovery, well, yeah, things like armor recovery vehicles, engineering vehicles, is not all about tanks and APCs and IFVs and jets, but actually things like the trucks that carry them around. And that's what German Aid to Ukraine is sort of pointing out here, that all of these vehicles, you see, those are the Pumas, the 4x4 Pumas from Italy there, ended up in Ukraine. But what they're being carried on, they're being carried on, is that Suzanne? No, it's not Susanna. What's that? Adita. The 146th Repair and Restoration Regiment has shared some new images showing various vehicles and weapon systems provided by partners of Ukraine being transported by one of the total of 90 HX-81 tank transporters supplied by Germany. If Germany hadn't supplied those tank transporters, you can have all the equipment you give them, but you can't get it around the country, then you're going to be in a bit of a spot of bother. So this is really, really important. Again, Germany, kudos. Thanks to Germany, Ukraine is able to do an awful lot more. I don't know if Who's Popping is saying you're a specialist in heavy haulage military equipment. Good to have you on board then. Awesome. So the Czech Republic has cancelled the modernization of T-72 tanks for transfer to Ukraine due to technical problems with the fire control system. This is really sad news that they aren't going to get a whole bunch of T-72s that they were going to upgrade in the Czech Republic. They're not going to get them to Ukraine. It's seen that they just couldn't do the required work on them. Reportedly, the state of these 30 Czech T-72 M4CZ tanks is worse than was earlier assumed. According to the manufacturer, their fire control systems are beyond repair, and completely replacing them would take 2 years and a lot of money. So they are unfortunately, likely to be stripped of useful parts and then scrapped. Hopefully those parts are still going to be useful, maybe. But 30 T-72s don't seem to be on their way now to Ukraine. So that is a bit of a shame. Right, the US has offered to sell Poland 250 used Stryker vehicles for a single ceremonial $1. And Warsaw is preparing to accept that deal as soon as the logistics can be worked out, according to Poland's Minister of National Defense, according to Breaking Defense. Now, have I got information on this? No, I haven't. Damn. Thomas Tyner wrote a little bit on this, saying that, it looks like these might be Strykers that are being, that have been in the service of a cavalry unit in, I think, Romania or American NATO force in the US. But rather than take them all back to the US, I presume because they're going to be rendered obsolete anyway and replaced by something else, they are going to give Poland, maybe these are based in Poland then actually, give Poland first dibs on 250 Strykers, and you can just buy them for $1. Well, that's brilliant, because you would expect those strikers to go to Ukraine. You really would. And Ukraine has made some pretty decent use of the strikers. I don't know if they need to be adapted at all, these ones. But that would be super, super good. And good news there. But the flip side of that is that, oh my goodness, it really does look like the US is pulling out of Europe. And that's kind of where Thomas Tyner was going with his statement, which is like, this leaves only, I think, one unit in, was it in Italy or Romania, one cavalry unit or something like that. And he was obviously, not happy with that, as it's, again, indicating a further isolationism, further element of isolationism from the Americans. Oh, right. Then are they not in Poland? They're not in Poland. Shipping is being worked out. Yeah, I couldn't remember. So they might be in Romania then, or somewhere like that. Because we did hear that they are pulling back from Romania, so it makes sense that they were in Romania, but they're being, for some reason, they're being sold to Poland and not, I don't know, Romania. Okay, I'm sure there's lots more details on that you guys have got access to. Okay, now the other day I was reporting on this because I said I was part of a discussion that someone linked me into on Twitter, where they're talking about the Japanese providing satellite assistance to Ukraine. And actually, that could be what the Firepoint manufacturers of the FP5 drone, cruise missile, the Flamingo cruise missile, are waiting for. So if you remember, I was saying that the Stillerman, the CEO of Firepoint, was saying, right, we've got the FP5 cruise missile, Flamingo cruise missile, and we want Turcom mapping, basically terrain mapping, to be part of the capabilities of these missiles, so that they fly mapping the terrain and then therefore can fly 30 to 40 meters above the terrain at all times, which makes them really freaking difficult to shoot down. They're pretty big missiles, but you're flying them 30 to 40 meters above the terrain, then that's very, very useful. But in order to have that, they need the mapping, and that takes an awful lot of computing power, an awful lot, I guess, satellite imagery and whatnot. And there was this discussion I was involved in that was talking about, like, Japan possibly being the providers of this satellite imagery, which would be really, really good. Now, people are talking about the strikers. Darren Merritt here saying the strikers can be upgraded by companies in Europe. Yeah, they'll certainly be, I presume, tinkered with as the strikers they've previously been given have been. Right, satellite. So then one of the people that was involved in this conversation on Twitter sent me this, which I think is a question that they've asked Perplexity AI here. They've said, this is answering a question about satellite work between Ukraine and Japan. So Ukraine and Japan are working together on access to and future co-development of a synthetic aperture radar SAR satellite constellation centered on the Japanese company IQPS's QPS-SAR system. Japan's IQPS operates a small SAR Earth observation constellation called QPS-SAR, currently with 5 satellites in orbit and more to be launched in 2026. These satellites provide high-resolution radar imagery that can see through cloud, smoke, and darkness, making them valuable for military intelligence and disaster monitoring. In early 2025, IQPS signed an agreement with Ukraine's Defense Intelligence, the GUR, to supply geospatial intelligence, including real-time or near real-time SAR imagery. The deal includes integrating IQPS systems and software into Ukrainian intelligence platforms over a 2 to 3 month period, so Ukraine can directly receive and exploit this data. The SAR data is used to track Russian troop movements, equipment concentrations, supply routes, and to support targeting. There you go. And battle damage assessment, even under poor weather or at night. The partnership is part of Kyiv's broader strategy to diversify away from heavy reliance on the US imagery by building a more international spatial intelligence ecosystem with partners like Japan, Finland, Germany, and Italy. Ukrainian defense officials have signaled plans from 2026 onward to move from just buying imagery to co-developing satellites and a wider space situational awareness system with partner countries, with Japan seen as a key player in the future architecture. Now, they have just announced having a space satellite production capacity going forwards in time. You know, you're wondering, why are they concentrating on these things? Surely their focus should be on like frontline stuff, but actually no, this is so important for Ukraine being able to succeed going forward. You know, obviously they need this capability now, but they're putting things in place to become like a major player going forward, again, without resilience or without reliance on the United States. So this fits within a 2024 Japan-Ukraine security agreement that explicitly includes cooperation on intelligence and protection of classified information. Available open sources do not show a clear okay, so no, then someone else, the questions were about something else. So I think we'll leave that there. So that is a potential for Ukraine, that they could be working with Japan to get that Turcom kind of imagery capability for the flamingos, or maybe not. But either way, they are working with Japan and other nations to at least, I don't know if it'd be completely replace the US, but mitigate the loss of the US if the US just go rogue and decide completely not to help Ukraine at all. So there you go. Right, moving on to the next piece. So Turkey, and I talked to you about this before. What's the context here? Okay, Turkey have wanted to take on as a member of NATO and aspiring to be a member of the EU. Well, I don't know about that. They wanted to buy F-16s and then F-35s. They've been allowed to buy F-16s, but on the condition that they do not operate the S-400s that they had bought off Russia just some time before that. I guess the idea is you cannot operate an American plane or a NATO plane and have Russian air defense systems, because then you as a nation can work out exactly how to shoot down an American plane with a Russian system, and you can feed that information back to Russia. So you absolutely, if you want F-16s and F-35s, you've got to get rid of your S-400s. So they've been umming and ahhing over this. They haven't used the S-400s as far as I'm aware. Although there were claims that they used, no, I don't know. Turkey will abandon Russian S-400 air defense systems within 6 months, so that Washington allows Ankara to purchase the latest American F-35 fighters, according to the US ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barak. Now, the question is, who gets those S-400s? You would hope that Ukraine would be able to get their hands on them. That would be super useful. I mean, the missiles are probably almost as useful as the weapons themselves, because they have existing systems that could probably use a whole bunch more missiles. But anyway, yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens to those S-400 systems. Now, Lithuania, the first EU country to restore conscription after Russia seized Crimea, calls up 5,000 for 2026. For the first time, draftees can apply for special operations forces training, including paratrooper courses, attack drone operator programs, as well as cybersecurity and information technology. Just including this to give you a sense that Europe is starting to arm up. We've got conscription changes and, you know, mobilization objectives and all sorts. The Germans are going hard on it. The Polish are going hard on it. The Navy of the UK and Norway are cooperating to counter the Russian underwater threat and protect underwater infrastructure in the North Atlantic, according to Militiani. By the way, this is the same time that Sweden is making big announcements over submarines. The agreement provides for joint patrols by fleets in the North Atlantic consisting of at least 13 ships and autonomous systems. So Europe is wising up to Russia and a threat that Russia poses. In fact, Timothy Milovanov, and this is with reference to an Economist article, I think. Yeah, Economist. So he summarized, I like it when Milovanov summarizes the article, so I don't have to read the whole article to you or for you. He says Europe is rearming at a speed not seen in decades. SAFE, the new 150 billion euro EU defense fund, already filled. 19 states applied. Poland alone asked for 43.7 billion euros, writes The Economist. SAFE plus the National Escape Clause open a massive spending channel. The NEC lets states add 1.5% of GDP to defense over 4 years, unlocking roughly 650 billion euros. This is a spine of Readiness 2030. So it was called initially Rearm 2030, and then I've seen that it's a bit too bellicose. So it's Readiness 2030. NATO's European members now commit to 3.5% of GDP for core defense by 2035, plus another 1.5% for infrastructure. So you remember there's this agreement to go up to 5%, 3.5 of which of GDP expenditure, 3.5% of which would be the spending on actual like military kit. 1.5% is our roads. Can they take these heavy trucks, railways? You know, we need to upgrade civilian infrastructure in order to support military infrastructure or military movements. Why this jump? Says The Economist, because America moves out. The Pentagon's global posture shifts forces to Asia and asks Europe to pay for all weapons sent to Ukraine. Trump pushes a fast peace deal in Ukraine. Europe sees this as a direct security threat. At the same time, Russia runs a full war economy. IISS warns Moscow could threaten Europe by 2027. In PPP, so that's purchasing power parity terms, Russia will spend as much on defense this year as all European NATO members combined. What that means is we often look at GDP as being the sole guide for, you know, how functional an economy is. And it is useful, but there are other ways of looking at it which are also useful, and none of them are perfect. So there are criticisms of PPP. What PPP does, so GDP says, well, look, you know, usually in American dollars as the kind of international currency, you say, how much is your domestic produce? What are you producing? Your kind of goods and services being produced a year in your country. And that is, you know, what your economy is worth on an annual basis. And then you compare that to each other. And so you say Russia produces, you know, 100 billion, UK 150 billion, US 500 billion, whatever it is. I'm making these numbers up. But then what that doesn't take into account is that 100 billion in Russia might actually be worth more than 150 billion in the UK, because in Russia, that 100 billion goes an awful lot further. So wages are cheaper. You can buy more stuff. You can make more things. And so actually, PPP, a PPP understanding of GDP is, it gives you just that different dimension. And if you understand if you're using the PPP metric, then Russia's economy is much, much bigger than people give it credit for being. Now, many people criticize using just PPP to understand economic power, but defenders of Russia will say, you know, the Russians themselves would say, we've got a massive economy compared to many other countries around the world if you compare it with what we can afford. So in PPP terms, Russia will spend as much on defense this year as all European NATO members combined. Okay, interesting. Europe must replace US firepower, ISR and airborne surveillance, strategic airlift, long-range precision strikes, hyperscale cloud for command and control. The IISS says copying these capabilities costs $1 trillion. Spending already explodes. European defense budgets are 50% higher than in 2022 and will reach 500 to 700 billion euros a year within 5 years. 30% goes on procurement. Poland has hit 4.8% of GDP next year. Nordics race to 3.5%. Germany targets 3.5% by 2029, which is $195 billion. Spain and Italy trail. Bottlenecks stay brutal. Germany needs a Bundestag approval for every contract above 25 million euros. 7-country missile program ELSA has spent 18 months without a clear requirement for MBDA. And even when Europe signs orders today, delivery takes 2 to 3 years. So even though Europe is really ramping up, there are still problems, there's still bottlenecks, and there's still like lack of orders from certain companies in certain domains that you think they'd really need them. Defense ministries now switch to spiral development, field weapons fast, upgrade constantly, stop waiting for the perfect weapon, just get the weapon out there and then bring out new iterations. Germany evaluates a jump from 10% to 30% of procurement budgets for disruptive tech by 2030. Britain has ring-fenced around £400 million for a wartime pace innovation unit. Europe has the money, factories, engineers, and tech, but it needs political will at a moment when pro-Russia far-right parties grow across the continent. Ukraine bought Europe time. Europe must now use that time. So that's a summary of that Economist article, hopefully pretty useful there. And then the final piece, the final nugget in this section is French aid to Ukraine saying, quote, until it can, or not him saying, this is it Nicosur Dan from Romania. Until it can rearm, Romania is looking for another ally to put boots on the ground. So this is the news that the US are pulling out of Romania putting NATO forces out of Romania. The country's president, Nicolas Dan, said talks were ongoing with unnamed allies about a potential replacement of the US troops. The country isn't trying to reverse the US decision on the withdrawal, Romanian officials said. So they're not saying, please stay, please stay. Okay, you want to go, but we need some help on the Eastern Front. Also, by the way, Romania is probably thinking, goodness me, if all these American soldiers leave our country, all that money that comes into the country, all that expenditure on infrastructure and in our shops and in our country, all those people going out on the piss or on a Saturday night or whatever, that's all money that goes into Romania. You pull all those troops out of Romania, and that's a big hit to tax revenue and to just the local economies. So the country's president is saying, look, we're not going to try and reverse the decision, but we do need replacement from someone, both from a strategic point of view and maybe an economic point of view. But France is now in the spotlight after years of urging lukewarm Europeans to wean off military dependency of the US. Paris is seeing its predictions come through. So for so long, everyone's like, oh no, we're fine with buying off the US. Of course we want to buy some of the best stuff of the US. Why do you always bang on about being independent and so on and so forth? And then Trump gets in and everything goes nuts and everyone's like, oh no, well done France. Yeah, good effort, mate. Yeah, well done PA, you've done a good job there. Nicolas said Dan will travel to France in the near future to discuss defense cooperation, including a possible military presence in Romania. So that's pretty interesting. NATO is preparing to confront Russia with limited US support. Right, we're going to move on to Ukrainian bits and pieces next. But before we get there, let's just make sure that all of you guys are happy in the live chat. Thank you for so many of you being here. This is a bit of an intermission. You can go and get your ice cream, get your popcorn, get your peanuts, and then sit back down in your comfortable seats after the intermission. So the intermission will see us say thank you very much to all of the members here, and we've got some opinions from ex-Penguin95. Worrying US isolationism mirrors 1930s World War II lead up, doesn't it? Just like there are so many parallels that people are pointing out. It's quite incredible and very, very worrying indeed. King Raccoon, thank you for being a member, matey. Subscribing is free. Let's get to 100,000 subs. That'd be amazing. Thank you, Pirate, for reminding people. And Zeb Carter, thank you for gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Really appreciate that, mate. Very kind indeed. Julian Rossiter says, we know Russian investors were in SpaceX, and I'm sure we'll find out about Russian investors in X also, Twitter. Quite a return on your money, given the damage X does globally. No wonder Russia doesn't want it over there. I mean, the amount of expenditure, I would love to know how much money the Russians have spent on buying blue ticks on Twitter, because I think that's really good value money. The amount of disruption they can cause on Twitter and other places with their bots and trolls. Like I said to you, I think Russia really should have not bothered invading Ukraine, spent all the money that they have spent on a war on bots and troll farms, and they would have disrupted so many elections much more effectively by now. It's just incredible. And people like Elon Musk don't seem to find this a problem. They see electoral interference as, yeah, it's fine. It's just freedom of speech. So yeah, go for it. It's not, it's not information warfare. It doesn't matter if it's a state actor, literally kind of, I mean, yeah, literally, I don't mean metaphysically. I mean, it is a literal invasion of our heads that happens when you have such an attack on our social media platforms. So there you go. Little whiskey shop. Hey, Mark, we'll send you a bottle of white port, JP, if you plug my... Oh, my word. I've been meaning to do this for days. And then poor man, he's so... Right. Oh, okay. Goodness. Thank you. What I was wondering is whether you were going to turn it into one of those official government ones. So what am I talking about? Mark from the Little Whiskey Shop has put together a petition, and normally these petitions are for British people only if it's like an official government petition, but if it's like a change.org petition, then it's generally not. And I need to find that. Mark, if you can put it in the live chat, because it's back. We have such an active oh no, here it is. No. No, it's not there. If you can put it in live chat, then that would be great, because I can't find the petition. But Mark has put together a decent petition to, or is this it? Please sign. Yeah, I think I found it. Right, let's show this to you. Thanks, Mark. Okay, let's see. Hopefully this is the right one. Petition for so it is UK centric, but I think it can be signed by other people. He's just started up, so there's only 47 verified signatures. I'm going to just put it. It's a change.org petition. I'm posting it in the live chat. And there's a petition for UK defensive border monitoring and rear area logistics support for Ukraine. In other words, petition to get the British forces, and hopefully other forces as well, working inside Ukraine on a more formal basis, helping with logistics, helping with monitoring the border, and so that frees up lots of Ukrainian soldiers or personnel to then go and help on the front lines and whatever. So, summary: we call on the UK government to prepare and, subject to Ukraine's invitation, deploy non-combat UK teams to western and northern Ukraine to secure rear areas, protect civilians, deter and document cross-border incursions from Belarus, and sustain humanitarian corridors. The initiative would be lawful, humanitarian, and de-escalatory aligned with NATO support mechanisms and international humanitarian law, IHL, and would free Ukrainian forces for frontline defense. Request: we ask the government to 1. Deploy border monitoring and rear area security teams focused on civilian infrastructure and corridor protection. 2. Deploy logistics, transport and supply chain units to keep aid and medical supplies moving. And 3. Establish a UK-led coordination cell with the Ukrainian authorities and NATO partners to ensure transparency, lawful conduct, and risk reduction. The posture is strictly defensive and non-combat, operating only with Ukraine's consent. Then it talks about humanitarian benefits, risk mitigation, the legal basis and NATO frameworks. He's done a lot of work on this. Call to action. So if you do sign this, please share it lots, share it on multiple social media platforms. And I can't believe I've forgotten to do this over the last few days. My head is just full of stuff, and massive apologies to Mark. But this would be absolutely fantastic if we can get this going. I don't know, I don't know how you get to start up official government petitions, Mark, like the green ones that are like proper UK ones, because there's a legal requirement for a government petition to actually debate it in Parliament if it gets 100,000 signatures. Whereas with change.org and others, there's no legal requirements, as far as I understand. But correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, but anyway, please sign it anyway. Change.org, and Mark has put a lot of effort into that, so thank you to Mark for doing that. That is, of course, very UK centric. Right, okay, we're going to move on, and share it everywhere. And that reminds me, if you go onto the description below, Benny Pye's been working a hell of a lot on trying to get this channel a bit more noticed or whatever. I'm not very good at stuff like that, so he's really helped out. And in the description below are all our different social media locations, and we are trying to get on them all, Threads and Facebook, and obviously Twitter, Blue Sky, and I don't know, all these, Reddit as well. And I guess if anyone wants to help out modding any of those places, then please reach out to us somehow, or Benny Pye in a live chat or something. I don't know. I don't understand these things. But yeah, so please go and join in discussions, and share videos and whatnot if you can. If you care to, then obviously that's really kind of you. Right, we're going to return to Ukrainian assistance that they're giving themselves, as in military production and innovation. No reports here reporting that Ukraine's defense ministry has launched the budget information system to ensure transparent financial oversight of military spending. Amedy Shmihal says, the Minister of Defense, Shmihal says it offers real-time access to data on allocated, used and remaining funds, eliminating delays and blind spots. This will probably be also something to do with making sure that they eliminate potential for corruption and things are as transparent as possible. So that sounds really positive for Ukraine. It's launching a missile fuel production facility in Denmark, which I've talked to you about before, but there was a lovely little video. This isn't a video, that's a picture of these guys digging the first holes, and essentially Denmark and Ukraine working in tandem there. The first NATO member to allow this, the Firepoint factory in Voyens, aims to stay out of Russia's reach, but locals are worried. And you can imagine that it would be a little bit worrying to have a Ukrainian factory making solid rocket fuel for their missiles over in Denmark. And you'd be thinking that is a prime target for Russian attacks. Nonetheless, that's really good news for Ukraine, because, you know, ideally Ukraine want to make that in Ukraine, build that in Ukraine, and it'll be cheaper and there'll be less of a footprint and logistically more efficient. But of course, you cannot protect these places as well as Europe can, in terms of, you know, anywhere in Ukraine is fair game for the Russians at the moment with their missiles and drones. Right, I've shown you this video. I've referenced this video plenty of times. Firepoint came out with a nice sort of 2-minute plus video of them making shiny missiles and drones and whatnot. Manufacturing process and testing of FP1s and 2s and the FP5 Flamingos, so drones and missiles. Firepoint has also begun producing ballistic missiles. The process of codifying these FP7 tactical ballistic missiles at Ukraine's Ministry of Defense is expected to be completed by the end of this year. So 2026 is looking like it could be a time for, finally, for Ukrainian ballistic missiles. Firepoint has also released some more photos of Flamingo missiles supposedly being delivered, although that looks to me like that's in a workshop. But they say that Firepoint company has provided yet another batch of Flamingo missiles to Ukrainian defenders. I do wonder whether they're stockpiling some of these, whether they're waiting for that Tercom kind of satellite, that terrain imagery I was talking about, whether they are waiting for that to come online and then can fire these without getting them shot down so easily. I'm not saying they're easy to shoot down, but you know what I mean. Or whether they are using them without us really realizing, or whether they're not producing as many of these as we think. At the moment, estimations are at least 3 a day. So you expect to see 3 Flamingos being used every night, or 21 a week. Are we seeing that? Don't know. All we know is that refinery's blown up and that depot's been hit and there's been a big explosion. We don't often know what hit them. But if I kind of like the idea, I would like it if they were stockpiling these, right? And assuming they have enough launchers, and that's obviously another challenge. But it would be great if, like, you know, all of this rhetoric about the US national security strategy, you know, having the US changing sides effectively, and Russia having all the cards and Ukraine having no cards, and then suddenly Ukraine launches like 60 Flamingo missiles in one night and totally obliterates loads of Russian stuff. I mean, that's what I go to bed dreaming of. But yes. Just to remind people, let people know, Martin UK here says, when JP finishes, please pop over to Rick the Ukrainian live. He will be live for at least another 4 hours. Also live on Twitch. If you have an Amazon account, you can gift him a sub for free. So yeah, Rick the Ukrainian, I haven't spoken to him for ages, but he's very famous for exceptionally long live streams. I think mine are long enough. Bloody hell. Right, Ukrainian drone components are already competing with Chinese counterparts in terms of price and quality, says Ukraine's defense minister Shmihal. Now, if this is true, that is brilliant, because, I mean, we've already heard that there is at least one Mavic-style drone that Ukraine is producing 100% from its own components. That's what they need, because the Chinese then, you know, there can be bottlenecks. They can play around with the parts so that they aren't. So you remember there were a load of drones that came over with sabotaged chips in them, thought that they were sabotaged back in China. The only issue that I've said before with relying more and more on drones coming from anywhere but China is that then that if you are stopping demanding as much from China, then China can then get all of those drones to Russia instead. So there is a bit of a zero-sum game. And I guess what the Ukrainians would want is that, assuming China isn't going to stop them buying drones, and we have heard that they are actually limiting Ukraine's ability to buy as many drones as they'd like and components. But assuming that doesn't happen, what you would want is Ukraine to still buy as many drones as possible from the Chinese, just so the Russians can't buy them, as well as making loads of stuff themselves and becoming more self-reliant if possible. Now, the Ukrainian company DoD Solution has developed an auto guidance system for drones that allows you to accurately guide a drone to a moving target. Now, it appears we have seen this as well. So there have been 2 videos I've seen over the last week of what looks like automatic targeting for drones, which then means that you don't need to control them from your operator, which means that they are no longer jammable. So what you do is you jam the signal that stops the drone being in contact with the operator, and so it just kind of drops out the sky. But if you can fix onto a target, and before it gets close enough that the jamming works on the drone, it's fixed on a target and you no longer need the operator. So the drone itself can autonomously fix onto that moving target and hit the moving target on its own. Then that can't be jammed in the traditional manner, in traditional way. So anyway, this company has created embedded solutions based on AI that enable disposable kamikaze drones to autonomously identify, track, and accurately hit targets. I'm fairly sure I've seen that already. So, but anyway, all good news. Now, General Chereshnia has introduced the AirPro interceptor drone designed to neutralize enemy reconnaissance and strike drones. AirPro demonstrates a speed of over 200 kilometers an hour, which allows it to effectively intercept a wide range of enemy targets. Of course, things like Jet Shahed drones go over 400 kilometers an hour, so you need particular interceptor drones to do that. And there are some of those, but there are more and more drones coming onto the kind of marketplace, if you like, in terms of interception with each passing week. And you've got engineers of the Independent Design Bureau here presenting a new pulsating jet engine, the Grim 17, according to Militiani. It's got a length of 940 millimeters, diameter of 100 millimeters, weight only 1,980 grams, and the engine is able to create a minimum thrust equivalent of 2.5 kilograms and a maximum of 7 kilograms. The working thrust limited to 90%, 6.3 kilograms. I don't know what any of that means, but my understanding is this is a pretty small and light pulsating jet engine, which means it's going to be very useful for drones, I would have thought. So again, that innovation remaining. And here's another jet engine, but I think it's a different company. So the Ukrainian company Skopa Industries is preparing for flight tests of a new jet engine for unmanned aerial vehicles, the Shepit. Again, according to Militiani, this is a domestic model of a pulsating air-type jet created entirely from Ukrainian components. And I presume these are 2 different stories. That jet engine looks a bit bigger, but yeah, there's innovation taking place there. There is really good domestic production going on in Ukraine. As we so often discuss, they just need the money. There's this difference between potential and actual. Potential's up here, actual's down there. With the money, they could produce so much more stuff. Ukrainian naval drone is armed here with AIM-9L missiles. Now, one of these drones, one of these USVs, seemed to be hit the other day by a Lancet drone that was caught on a Russian reconnaissance drone bit of footage. I don't know if it's one of these. The claim was that they certainly had missiles on board because one of them cooked off afterwards. So it could be that one of these has already been hit. Nonetheless, they have the capabilities of shooting down Russian, I guess, jets and helicopters with these drones. And I don't know what the capability is with regard to, with a range of 17 kilometers, speed of up to Mach 2. It's a deadly weapon for helicopters, so more for helicopters. The Russians have to get within 10 kilometers of the drones with their weapon systems to destroy them. I don't know how the Ukrainians are finding the target. If it's purely visual using the camera, then jets are difficult to hit. Yeah, okay, so you could hit jets, but it's about acquiring the target in the first place, and you'd need fairly complex radar on board one of these things. It doesn't look like they've got that, and that would also be fairly expensive. But if it's visual, and you could go and park these things, I don't know how you would use these, whether they get used in a flotilla of other USVs, or whether you can just send a bunch of these off to near the coastline to hang out maybe between some rocks along the coast of the Black Sea and wait for helicopters to pass over, and then you're like, oh, there's a helicopter, fire your rockets. If you know the normal, I mean, I guess the Ukrainians have probably got a good idea of the normal flight path of regular helicopter patrols and whatnot. Just go and hang these out underneath, and then bish bash bosh, you've got some helicopters who've been shot down. So that's good innovation there, good development for the Ukrainians. Ukrainian developers are improving drones daily, says Kirilo Shevchenko again, with immediate battlefield testing. Who are these? Robiniers. Yeah, Robiniers showcased a groundbreaking line of components: the Jalo electric trigger for remote fire, the Kyiv autonomous guidance module, a Starlink mini stabilizer for reliable comms in rough terrain, and a naval drone. So the things like that, you're going over rough terrain, things bouncing all over the place, that can maybe play around with comms and reliable comms. A naval drone control unit for multi-platform missions. Drones can engage targets autonomously, reducing operator risk. With 40% of components now Ukrainian made, costs are at least 10 times lower than NATO equivalents. Wow. These innovations close real combat gaps, signal loss, manual guidance, making drones smarter, safer, and more scalable. So really good innovation still from the Ukrainians. And I talked about this drone previously, where the Ukrainians are making their own drone that is now it's an 18-inch drone rather than the kind of normal 13-inch ones that they would otherwise produce. And this means that they can roll out these larger munitions and drop them on Russians. So Ukraine rolls out upsized FPV drones built for heavier, harder hitting warheads. It uses an 18-inch frame, carries heavier warheads, and offers longer range with a larger battery and fiber optic control to boot. It looks like that's what's on the bottom there. That's a fiber optic rather than that being a weapon. But yeah, that's Tashka drones creating this new 18-inch bad boy there that can go and cause hell for the Russians. Right, Colonel Pavlo Palisa announced plans to reform how recruits are distributed among brigades. I've talked about this several times, just to remind you that is now happening. They're getting predictable number of soldiers will train within their assigned brigades, improving skills for specific tasks and equipment. I did say that in the last one as well, just to remind you that reforms are taking place. And the commander of the 3rd Army Corps, Brigadier General Andriy Beletsky, has announced the creation of the Veteran Corps, which will unite servicemen and veterans of all units of the Defense Forces of Ukraine, according to Militiani. So that's cool. They're trying out, like I said to you before, they need to be able to generate more troops from different areas. They need disabled people to be able to fight, in different ways. So, if you've lost your limb and you have prosthetics now, because you've lost your right leg below the knee, so you can't fight as easily in the trench lines. Well, can you still operate a big machine gun on the back of a mobile fire unit? Yep, absolutely. Well, you're back in, mate. And then veterans units, women's units, all sorts going on. And they need as much help as they can get, the Ukrainians, for sure. Right, on to the final couple here. We are looking at just what the Russians are doing. Not too much, to be honest. This, though, is possibly one of the most important things I'm going to say today. I spoke to you right at the beginning of the war. And in fact, I think I wrote an article on this for Only Sky, although the site doesn't exist anymore as it did. I used to say an awful lot that Russia can't win this war. The only way Russia can win this war is if China step in and support them. And by that, I meant, support them much more overtly than they already are. But actually, they are supporting Russia, to the point where Russia has been able to prolong this war. And then what happened is I forgot about North Korea. I was just thinking, well, China are the ones that are going to help Russia. If China help, then Ukraine are in trouble. If China can't help, then if they deem it too kind of geopolitically risky to help Ukraine, to help Russia, then Ukraine should, in some sense, prevail. But I forgot about North Korea. Then North Korea came and got involved. I was like, well, that was the argument I was making for China. So actually, North Korea have been a game changer. They have changed the game, and they've allowed Russia to prolong the war significantly. The amount of artillery ammunition that have been provided by North Korea is astounding. The number of troops is astounding, given the sheer volume of people that the North Koreans have put, like at least 15,000 frontline soldiers, possibly now 20,000, possibly even more than that, and then potentially 25,000 workers going into Yelabuga to work on drone manufacturing, and then you've got maybe 5,000-6,000 D miners and infrastructure workers that are probably just frontline soldiers. So just a ton of people, a ton of equipment like multiple launch rocket systems and self-propelled howitzers, etc., and ammunition. So North Korea have really helped Russia. China are helping Russia an awful lot. And this is bad news for Ukraine, because it just changed the calculation. It changes the calculation quite a lot. Russia will just keep on going attritionally. They don't give a damn about who dies and how many people die, as long as they can keep going, as long as there's somebody that can fill the gap. Well, what we've heard is that India is looking to help Russia out with 800,000 personnel. I reported that this morning. 800,000 people to go into as economic migrants, to go, or migrant workers to go into Russia, and then ease their labor shortages, which means that they can attract more people to fight in the war, because with a labor shortage there is you have the huge inflationary pressures of that wage spiral increase, where things become more expensive, wages go up, things become more expensive, wages go up, but also wages go up because you've not got enough workers. If you flood Russia with cheap labor to the tune of 800,000 people, which is mentioned, because remember, Putin's just gone to India and met with Modi, and it's all been a big loving. If India are realistic, I don't know if this is at all realistic, but assume worst case scenario, 800,000 workers go into Russia from India, then that will absolutely send wages downwards. And what that does is then makes joining the armed forces more attractive. And they don't even need to raise the bonuses to crazy levels. In fact, they're lowering the bonuses at the moment, because the army, therefore, is not competing with all these other industries that are having to put their wages up because of a labor shortage. If you're suddenly flooding the market with cheap labor, then you are going to get loads more people thinking, well, one of my best options is joining the army, because that is now one of the better paid places. And already it was being very well paid if they were actually paying people, rather than pulling a fast one. The bonuses were really good, relatively speaking, but they've been unable to afford that, so they've been cutting back on them. Now they can afford to continue cutting back on the bonuses, but it could be that the wages would be just good enough, and the small bonuses would be good enough to attract people, where there's been a massive depression of wages because of an influx of 800,000 Indians. So anyway, this might be a long way off, this might be quite abstract thinking, but I find that a problem. Then you have this. I haven't even got to the main part yet. India is reportedly set to help Russia produce drones that could be used against Ukraine. Moscow is offering tech transfers and battlefield experience in return. A delegation from Russia's FPV drone center visited India, with Putin signaling deepening defense ties. Modi called Russia a true friend. You have two countries with 1 billion people in each, just two countries representing 2/7 of the world population, now looking to help Russia. If this doesn't sound alarm bells, now people might go, oh, don't worry, this is just performative. India won't guaranteed that they would happily make money out of selling drones to Russia, unless the US get involved, particularly, or the EU, but particularly the US, much more powerful, and gets involved and says, right, you'll get sanctions if you help Russia. But then the US has just brought out a national security strategy that appears to be aligned with Russia, and the US is going batshit crazy over there. And you're thinking, well, I don't know what they're going to be doing going forward, but they're not going to be putting pressure on Russia and China to stop helping Ukraine. And you're thinking, fucking hell, the tables are turning at the moment. Well, you've got India and China saying, yeah, we're okay with helping Russia and we can announce that in public. And you've got the US not helping Ukraine. And you've got Europe left on its own. Meanwhile, Hungary and Slovakia being a bunch of dickwads. And Czechia having a change of government. And then lots of people restless around Europe, like Reform UK, AFD, and Rassemblement National. You're thinking, oh my goodness. Putin's plan appears to have been fairly sensible. It's not sensible. It's involved huge amounts of death for Russian people. But he's like, hey, we can outlast these guys. And as soon as his economy was looking like it was in super trouble, and it is in super trouble, China, India are saying, we're all right, we'll help them. And the US is like, oh, we'll take the foot off the accelerator. Oh, you know what, Hungary? You know what, Slovakia? You can have an exemption for a year. Oh, Europe, I can't believe you spend so much money on helping out Russia. Oh, but Europe, by the way, if you're friends of ours, you can continue spending money on Russia. Honestly, does my nut in this. We're the last month, I mean, just going backwards, big time going backwards. Trump and his administration are just signaling to the world that aggression is fine, that you can invade other countries, and a rules-based system is a thing of the past, and it's all transactional now. And as long as I'm all right, Jack, you know, that's fine. Moscow seeks a drone production partnership with India and offers tech transfers as part of the deal. Imagine India produces, you know, is responsible with its 1 billion person population for like smashing gajillions of drones into Russia. Then Ukraine are like, oh, cheers for that, thanks, we're screwed now. So yeah, I don't want to leave you on a downer, but that's really peed me off. And then Russian Shahed drones are now being equipped with rear view cameras to detect interceptor drones, but this one was shot down by a Sting, a Wild Hornets drone that came, as you can see the camera on the front there, just that front. I don't know whether it couldn't see the drone coming from above until too late, and there's probably a lag sending the signal back to Russia, but luckily this drone was still able to be taken out. But they are improving the capabilities of the Shahed drones to turn them into glorified FPV drones. There you go. Bosh. And just in the top left, that's a rear-facing camera, which is another concern for the Ukrainians, this cat and mouse game. So yeah, Macron was out in China, sorry, and just going full circle here. Then I think Europe are thinking, right, the US has gone nuts. They're starting a trade war with everyone. They don't like the EU. They don't like Europe. They're putting big tariffs on us. Then that puts pressure on us economically, and we have to look elsewhere. But then there's this big trade deficit with China, and actually, you know, we need to be selling our stuff, and we were selling it to the US, and now we can't sell it to the US because they whacked all these tariffs on us. So we need to sell it to China, but China's buying less and less of our stuff, and we're buying more and more of their stuff because obviously they're making things really, really cheaply. And so Macron has gone over, and it looks like we're going to have like a protectionist war. And, you know, world's going crazy. Just a complete sidebar here. It's not really to do with anything, although it can maybe have an effect on, I don't know, drones and actually power generation in Ukraine with regard to like mobile power units that can sort them out during power shortages and outages and whatnot. But CATL, CATL, who's a battery provider, provides a lot of batteries for Tesla. So this is going to affect Tesla, and unfortunately, this is going to give Tesla more power. And Elon Musk already looks like he's going to become the world's first trillionaire. But CATL have now developed a battery, which is, I've talked about sodium batteries coming online, which are going to be much cheaper than the lithium batteries and much more dense and not catch fire at all, and be much more energy dense and not have issues with hot and cold temperatures, nearly to the same degree. And anyway, sodium batteries are looking like it could be an absolute game changer. Well, I believe CATL are already making batteries that are still lithium batteries, but they're massively improved, and they're already shipping them now. And they're 42% cheaper. They've got a higher energy density. They're safer as well, so they don't catch fire as much. They are bigger, which is partly why they're cheaper, because for whatever reason. Anyway, This is then making energy storage way, way more effective, and then brings the price down of, again, electricity, like renewables, kind of like through electricity storage. And it's not so much for cars. These batteries won't be used in cars, although I think they eventually will be able to be used. But this is about energy storage, which Tesla is massive in battery storage. They don't just do electric cars, they do battery storage. Anyway, China is making these things by the bucket load every single day at the moment, and they like 42% price reduction. Whoa, that is massive. So, you know, there are going to be, you know, obviously every year there are innovations and things, but you know, sometimes there are quite sort of game-changing things that happen, and I wonder if what effect like massively cheap, much better batteries will have on the world in general, on how our power infrastructure is set up, but also, you know, things like drones. You can imagine getting to a situation where an FPV drone at the beginning of the war could get you, as we have now, could get you, what, 10 kilometers? And now we've got 60-kilometer fiber optic drones. And you can imagine, you know, battery operated FPV drones. I mean, it depends on like the signal, but if the signal is dependent on power, and you can get, I don't know, but you can imagine a situation where drone technology is improved with battery technology. 42 is a good number, isn't it? The 42nd Epistemology Battalion. Speaking of which, I have my I've got ones over there, as you can see, and I'm trying to fill this one up as well. I've got all my badges that I finally put up, and I'm missing one. I don't have the 5th one from Car for Ukraine. They have these beautiful little badges. And we are going to be, so one's a drone. That one with 4 rotors is a drone. You've got the ambulance one, or the medical one at the bottom. You got a fire one, and you've got an SUV with a gun on the back. And I'm just missing one of them, so I'm going to have to donate to our next campaign for Car for Ukraine. But at the moment, and just to remind you, we're not with Car for Ukraine at the moment. They've started a Christmas campaign. We are going to be a part of that after we have finished working at raising funds for Jigar's Poor. So if you can go to atpgeo.com/donate, and you will find yourself at this page with Jonathan Fink at Silicon Curtain. We have got now over halfway. Thank you for those who have added to that today. And we're hoping to get to 16,000 spondulis to raise money for the 80th Air Assault Brigade, getting them an all-terrain vehicle. And yeah, that's Jigar's Poor, who are absolutely superb. Go and look at all the details on that page, atpgeo.com/donate. And thank you for all of those who have already done so. I'm going to get back to my farm hour in a minute, to my family in a minute. And I was, it's been a pretty busy day. I had a massive Sunday roast just before starting this. And I've got twin 15-year-old boys, and one of them, Finn, brought his girlfriend round for the first time. We got to meet his girlfriend. Ooh, so that was exciting. Anyway, I presume she's gone now, run away. Yeah. Right, back to some of your super chats and whatnot, and thank you for all of those who have helped. Mitch Mazzarello comments on the new stated US security stance versus the rules-based order perspective. Well, I did do a video on this the other day. Mitch, this is worrying me so much at the moment, and I think the US has just moved away from the rules-based order, and is doing a lot of stuff in public that maybe it did beforehand, but it's now kind of like just they're saying the quiet parts out loud so often now. So things that the US maybe used to do that you're like, oh, do you think the US does that? No. And no, they are saying it out loud, and they're striking boats in the Caribbean and blowing things up that they shouldn't be blowing up. But maybe they used to do things like that before, but you just didn't know about it. Now they're releasing it onto social media. And then when people go, isn't that illegal? They go, oh yeah, maybe it is. And then they start deleting the videos and whatnot. But but essentially, there is just a massive strategic move away towards a 1930s American first Charles Lindbergh kind of situation, where if it wasn't for Pearl Harbor, the US would have allowed probably World War II to carry on regardless. And you know, the US is now moving back to that kind of thinking. The Heritage Foundation Project 2025 isolationist stance is a move away from Europe, is leaving Europe to be carved up by Russia. I need to look more into what's going on with China, because retired General Mick Ryan, the Australian general, saying actually, while Europe is horrendous, what they're doing with Europe, and it's all looking dodgy, with China is interesting, and it's left some people quite positive in the Indo-Pacific region, like maybe Japanese and Australians. But then other people have also said that Elbridge Colby wouldn't be, who's a big China hawk that's in the Department of Defense, wouldn't be happy with the strategy. So I'm not really sure what it means for China. I need to look at that in more detail. But I think the whole positioning of the American administration, the Trump administration, is just got in and is just doing, it's honestly, it's having a time of its life. It's doing all of the things it ever dreamed of doing that it knew would be deeply unpopular. But it says, we've got this mandate and we're just going to do it. And do you know what? We're going to do it without Congress. Do you know what? We should ask Congress for permission to do this, and we should ask Congress for permission to do that. But we're not going to ask Congress for permission, and we're just going to do it. And we're going to do everything by executive order. We're going to pardon all of these horrific people. It's just absolutely insane. The pardoning of the Honduran president, who is directly involved in 400 tons of cocaine smuggling, saying we're going to shove it up gringos' noses. That's who they've pardoned, while at the same time blowing up boats because they say we're so worried about drugs coming over into the US. None of those boats would be getting drugs to the US, right? The boat they blew up was going to Suriname, doesn't have the engine to get to the US. The drugs that get into the US come from Colombia, come from Mexico, and come from Chinese fentanyl. That's what kills people. And bloody Honduran president saying 400 tons across into the US, and that's why he's put in prison for 45 years by an American jury in an investigation that was started under the Trump administration. And that's who he's pardoned, because his mate Roger Stone sent him a letter saying, I think you should pardon this guy. All right, then, yeah, freaking go for it. Oh, by the way, I bloody hate drug smugglers. Well, I'm going to blow up these boats. Oh, yeah, bloody drug smugglers. Oh, look, one of the biggest drug smugglers ever involved in trafficking into the United States. I'm going to pardon you. I'm going to let you out of prison because, I hate drug smugglers. I hate the insanity, the absolute insanity of the Trump regime at the moment knows no bounds, but they're just getting away with doing whatever the hell they want. Someone just goes and whispers to Trump, oh, mate, Trumpy, you know we're friends and you do anything else. Well, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer and, you know, Charles Bronson, you know, all these mass murderers. I don't know, some might be dead already, but anyway, can you let them all free? Oh, yeah, I've heard of them. Oh, what about the Silence of the Lambs guy? Yeah, he's great. Let's let him go as well. No, yeah, apart from that one doesn't exist. Yeah, but he's one of the greatest Americans ever. You know, the American administration at the moment is just crazy ape bonkers. Anyway, Michel Deval. After the peace in Gaza, Trump's increased focus on Ukraine is not helping. Yeah, maybe it just don't focus on Ukraine. Could the distraction of the war in Venezuela be beneficial for Ukraine? That's a really good question. What you want is the US not to go against Ukraine, but maybe to be distracted, possibly, because like I keep saying, the more Europe say to the US, sod you guys, will help Ukraine, but you guys just sod off, then America will go, or Trump will go, oh, no, that's screw you. And then actually, we're going to take this away from Ukraine. We're going to stop giving targeting assistance, and we're going to stop doing this. And logistics, we're going to not do that. And we're not going to sell this kind of weapon. Then you're in trouble. And then if they say, and then we're going to lift sanctions, then you're in heaps of trouble. So like I keep saying, sorry to be a stuck record, Europe have such a difficult job on their hands, or allies of Ukraine have such a difficult job on their hands now to navigate this very delicate path between helping Ukraine and not pissing off the US so much that Trump does something nuts or the people around him do something nuts. You want him involved, but don't get too involved because actually you're just messing everything up. And that is really, really difficult. A stupidity in essence. So now Denmark have the ammo factory in Elling with Namo producing 155 mil, one OG 120 mil grenades and 5.56 mil and 7.62 mil bullets. The rebuild has started, and then the new factory in Vogens producing fuel for FP. And then also you've got like Rheinmetall are ramping up production facilities all over the shop. The Baltics, then you've got like Namo and people up in Scandinavia, and the Nordics. And you've got stuff going on down in, I think, Bulgaria, Romania, and then the French probably ramping up. BAE Systems probably. Like, we are getting to the point where Europe is actually properly ramping up. I mean, the issue for Ukraine is personnel, energy. It's the pressure cooker analogy I keep using. You know, for Ukraine, it's like people and energy, and just a relentless bombing every night that is hurting the crap out of Ukraine. The morale is going to be suffering. And for Russia, it's the economy, their economy, and particularly the hydrocarbons. Good news is we just heard that I think Urals has gone down to $43 a barrel today. I read somewhere. And if that's the case, that is freaking low. And that hurts Russia the most. So what Ukraine needs to do, this is why, they need ballistic missiles, they need cruise missiles, they need long range drones, and they need an absolute bloody ton of them. And then they need to continue absolutely destroying Russia's hydrocarbon capability, capacity to produce and refine these hydrocarbons. That hurts Russia because then they're relying on all their other industries to make them money and bring tax revenues in, but all the other industries are absolutely screwed. Like, it's all about the hydrocarbons. That's their pressure cooker. I mean, yes, materiel and yes, personnel, but they seem to be like, if they can go to India and North Korea and China cap in hand and say, help us, help us, help us, then actually that part of the pressure cooker doesn't get too pressurized. They can just prolong the war with randos from around the world, or their own people that now they can force to come to the front line because they're bringing workers from India and North Korea. That's, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, or it's two sides of a square, or whatever. You're moving in people, migrant workers means more troops. I think that's what I've been trying to say. I mean, this is only just like my own reasoning from the top of my head. So I'm no expert on any of this. You know that. Hopefully I make logical sense. But to me, it would seem that they would be able to release more Russians to fight on the front line, or even force them to fight on the front line. Like, the reason why they don't want to do a full mobilization is because it would collapse the Russian economy. But if you can get in 800,000 Indians, now I don't know how quickly that would be realistically able to be done. But if you suddenly get in 800,000 Indian migrant workers, then you're like, well, that's 800,000 people we can take from the economy and put on the front line, and we'd still be at the same place we were, broadly speaking, give or take. Or 400,000 people from the economy, put them on a front line. That's really, really, really worrying. So yeah, Europe is building up at the moment, which is great, and that will help Ukraine. But Ukraine needs people. They need people, which is why Mark's petition to get UK and hopefully other nations to consider getting their forces into Ukraine, not to fight, but to free up other people in Ukraine to go and fight on the front lines. I mean, I do wonder why Ukraine changed the rule to allow 18 to 22-year-olds to go abroad, men, because you're going to lose them. They ain't coming back. A lot of them, sadly. Stupidity in essence. I'm glad that Denmark is getting a 3-layered air defense system, SAMP-T-NG, so the new generation SAMP-T, which should be good at taking down ballistic missiles. NASAMS, which uses the Sidewinder AIM-9X missiles, the air-to-air missiles from a ground attack mode. They've got those in Ukraine. And IRIS-T SLM, the medium-range IRIS-T system, both of which have operated really well in Ukraine. Don't know so much about the SAMP-T. They've only got a couple of those in Ukraine. But the Danish army is procuring 16 Skyranger 30 turrets. So these are the Skyrangers are the Leopard 1 chassis tanks with the Oriclon turret on top that fires loads of lead into the sky and is really good at taking out things like drones. So that seems to me like a 4-layered air defense system that mount on a Piranha 5 armored personnel carrier. Oh, right. So the turret for Skyranger 30 turrets, right? So that's the Oriclon. So it's not the Sky. So the 16 turrets that go on the Piranha 5 armored personnel carriers, combining a 30mm cannon with missiles. So yeah, brilliant stuff. And of course, Denmark will be looking. All the nations helping out Ukraine will be looking. Well, all nations around the world will be looking at Ukraine to see how they need to change their armed forces and their provisions to adapt to modern warfare. Stupidity in essence. I'm done with the US admin in all aspects. I've got to this point where I'm finding it really hard to hold back, mate. Honestly, I'm finding it really hard to hold back. I just am flabbergasted at what is taking place, and it just makes me so sad. It makes me so sad that a country with the heritage and the potential of the United States is moving in the wrong direction in all ways that I can really foresee. Just it's so sad, and it's sad for Ukraine. Trump really could have been a great leader, as in he really could have helped stop the war in Ukraine in a magnificent way. If he'd come in and said on January the 21st, I am going to sanction the crap out of Russia. He could even say, look, we're not going to get Ukraine many more weapons. We can go through the whole thing of everyone buying off us, but we're not going to give them more weapons. But what we will do, which doesn't, mean that loads of people are necessarily dying, that they will necessarily die. But what we will do is destroy the Russian economy so they're on their knees, and that will force them to the negotiating table. He could have done that. And he would have rightfully been congratulated for doing that had he done that on January the 21st. But instead, on January the 21st, he went down Russian appeasement, and he hasn't stopped for 10 months. And the only good thing he's really done, the really good thing he's done, is sanction Lukoil and Rosneft, and that had tremendous effect. And it really has. And then he lets off Hungary and Slovakia. So it's like, you're doing a good thing. That's really good. Oh, no, now you've gone and mitigated the success of that. So honestly, I'm at the point where I just want to shout. I want to go outside and shout at the sky. I want to scream at the top of my lungs. What the freaking hell are you doing? Like, are you just demented, or are you surrounded by evil people? And the answer to those questions is yes. Anyway. Mitch Mazarol, perhaps dangle a few more shiny peace prizes in front of Donald. That seems to grab his attention, irrespective of anything else currently burning down. And it's just so sad that the world knows how Donald Trump operates. I mean, what's incredible about this, Mitch, is that we all now know that you can treat Donald Trump like a freaking 10-year-old, no, like a 7-year-old, and you can manipulate him that way. If I suddenly found myself in Donald Trump's body while I was receiving the FIFA Peace Prize from Infantino, I would have just been mortified and embarrassed. Oh my God, you guys think I'm this simplistic and this easy to manipulate? Like, am I this really? Is this me? But an example, I was listening to a British historian earlier today. He was talking about this phone call, one of the phone calls between Putin and Trump, where Fiona Hill was listening in. And Putin was saying to Trump, oh, well done, you've done such a good job. And this is back in 2019, right? So, or sometime like that. And Putin was saying to Trump, oh, well done, you've done such an amazing job on Gaza. And Trump's like, yeah, look how amazing I am. It's like, oh, it's so good, you could even name the country after yourself. And then Trump was like, no, I think that would be a step too far. Like, Yeah, of course it is. He's being sarcastic, mate. Like, you can't even tell when people are taking the piss out of you. And that's what I mean. Like, you can't tell when people are taking the piss out of him. He can't tell when, like, he can't tell that FIFA have just scrabbled together this peace prize because you threw your rattles out the pram when you didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize. So everyone's like, oh, we've got to get old little Donny a prize, give him a bit of gold. Oh, can we get him one of those chocolate gold coins that you get at Christmas? Put that on a ribbon and give that to him. Yeah, might as well. Well, you know, and then the whole thing is pathetic. It's just pathetic. Like, he should be mortified and embarrassed, but actually he's like, it's the greatest privilege of my life. I'm the proudest moment of my life. No, it's almost people are taking a piss out of you. Do you not see this? And he's got no sense of self. He's got no self-awareness, no awareness of really the psychological the psychology going on here, and how he's being treated, and how he's being treated as a kind of 5, 7, 10-year-old. It is. And if I was American, and I'm sorry, you know, I'm sure many of you listening, well, I'm not sure many of you still listening would have voted for Trump. But if you did, you know, I need to be careful. But like, unfortunately, yeah, you voted for someone that I find it really hard. Yeah, if I say to my children, this is who you should look up to being, this is the sort of person I want you to be. If we think about who are the people we would want our children to be, like Donald Trump would be last on the list. It'd be right down the bottom. My God, if you turned out like him. Yeah. So I just, anyway, that's enough ranting. Stop giving me Donald Trump potential rants. But yeah, I mean, this is why I said, Mitch, that the job of Mark Rutte, and I know that Jonathan Fink disagreed with me the other day when I did a live stream, but I said the job of Mark Rutte is to keep NATO existing still. And the only way you keep NATO existing is having Trump just about on board enough. And the only way you do that is you do the whole Infantino FIFA Peace Prize. You call him daddy. You shine his shoes. You say he's the most wonderful person. And it's sickening and it's disgusting that we have to do that. And what a sad state of affairs that we have to do that. But we have to do that because if we don't, then he goes and joins the bad guys. And that is counterproductive. It's that zero-sum game approach to Donald Trump. He's like, I'm either with you or I'm against you. Well, we'd rather have you with us, but in order to maintain you with us, we have to polish your shoes and tell you how wonderful you are. And it makes me feel sick, but I've got to do it because otherwise you'll get because you're so fragile, you get so peed off, you'll go and join your mates Vladimir and Xi Jinping. It's an absolute disgrace. But this is it, Rob. How long before Europe can tell the US to F off? The problem is exactly that. If we tell, and by the US, you all understand, not American people, but the Trump administration. You know, you do that, then Trump administration says, well, I will put tariffs on you. And so it will be an economic disaster and it will be an intelligence disaster for Ukraine, targeting disaster assistance. And then if he then starts reducing sanctions, then, well, you know, he's basically just with Russia. And that's the problem. And it's just a classic dilemma. It's, Paul Gilbert, I fully understand how you feel about the US regime. Grifters through strength and greed combined with evil hypocrisy. And hypocrisy is actually something that really annoys me. I've worked this out over the last couple of weeks that I keep getting really angry when I talk to you guys about certain things. And it's like, imagine what they would say if Joe Biden or Barack Obama did this. They'd be going batshit crazy. So when Fox News doesn't do that, I get really incensed with that kind of hypocrisy. That really grates with me. It triggers me. I think the incompetence will bring them down by the midterms. it's going to be interesting because things are looking spicy at the moment. There is just a real level of incompetence. I mean, the key to the Republican success, and sorry, the Trump success, because there are many different types of Republicans. The key to Trump's success is the continued support from Fox News. If Fox News start communicating to their viewers, because I did a video on this a week or so ago, where I said that Trump doesn't know a lot, but also a lot of Trump MAGA supporters don't know what's going on because they exist in a Fox News or ON or Newsmax silo. And this is true. I mean, loads of analysts are talking about this at the moment. If that was to be broken, then you break that link and he becomes far less popular. Because, you know, the only thing that communicates to people at the moment that Trump might be talking shite is going to the shops and seeing that things are more expensive. So today we hear that the beef prices are at record high. So if you're a MAGA American supporter and you keep watching Fox News and Trump comes on and says, there is no inflation. He keeps saying there is no inflation, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, oh, I believe everything. Oh, this is amazing. Okay, and everything you've done is amazing. And these narco terrorists have been blown up. Yay! And I'm not seeing anything negative. I'm not seeing the other side of the story. But then you go out and everything's more expensive at your shop. You're like, that's your cognitive dissonance moment. How do you deal with that? Do you sync that? Do you find ways around that, or do you go, something is wrong here because I'm being told that inflation is under control and things are more expensive now than they've ever been? Those two things can't be true. But in every other context, the information is just coming to you from your Twitter feed and your algorithms, and that Elon Musk is feeding to you, and what Fox is feeding to you, and you're not getting a reality check. The only moment that the rubber hits the road is when you go to the shop, and because everything else is like, well, you know, Venezuelan people, narco terrorists, I can't fact check that. What's going on around the world? Well, you're telling me, okay, I've got no reason to fact check that, and yeah, this is whatever, and you're consistently telling me that Mandani's a communist. Okay, that's great, and this, and okay, Fox News, yep, and then boom, you go to the shops, and it ain't true. So I think the moment, sorry, I've just gone off on one. The moment, Paul, that Fox News shifts to start being more critical of Trump is the moment Trump is in serious doo-doo. And there are little elements of Fox News saying things a bit more critically about Trump, but still, it's in the main, it's massively supportive. Stupidity in essence. Thanks, my Danish friend. FIFA is just as corrupt as DJT. I don't know whether it still is to the degree it certainly was in Sepp Blatter's time, when, you know, you had Warner and people taking huge amounts of money, and you had, you know, Qatar World Cups and Russia World Cups, and you're like, really they would have voted, really? Okay, no, that's just massive corruption. And then that was kind of outed, but it must still be massively corrupt. I just don't think to the level it was, but I assume it's still hugely corrupt. Yeah. And talking about hypocrisy, says Stupidity in essence, Trump as a peacemaker and at the same time killing people from Venezuela. Yeah, that's it. That's what gets me. It's like, but it's also just the brazenness that he can announce it to the world. It's what gets me as well, mate, is because I hate lying, right? I've always hated lying. I think I've said this to you before. I think I get it from my dad. My dad he couldn't lie to the insurance company, and you know, whatever. It's like lying, just couldn't do it. And I'm not trying to say, oh, whoa, look at how amazing I am. Actually, it's nothing. It's not a choice. It's just something that's kind of pathological in me that I think has just been inherited from my dad. And I really have a problem with lying. And when I see someone like Trump get up and say, I've stopped 8 or 9 wars or whatever, I'm like, no, you haven't. And I get really annoyed because either you are just outright lying, or you're completely deluded and the people around you are lying to you. But that kind of deception, I really don't like deception. It gets to me. It's like one of my trigger things. And so that really, like, hypocrisy and lying is all part of that. Yeah, it really does get to me. Anyway, thank you for allowing me this chaise longue moment of a bit of a therapy session. please, King Raccoon, you can't knock my jumpers. They're all amazing, and I won't have you say anything else. I warn you. I warned you then. I'm warning you now. My retro beige diamond jumper is a sight to behold, and what's wrong here is your eyes and perception and understanding of what style is. Nothing if not stylish, King Raccoon. And yeah, I will make you take that all back. Right. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for your support. I really genuinely appreciate it. I've thanked people on Buy Me a Coffee as well today that was long overdue. Thank you. And Curtis Engel, thank you so much. And I need to get to PayPal as well. There are loads of ways people support me, and just I always honored. So thank you. And for the people in the super chat and all the members, thank you, thank you, thank you. As mentioned, Benny Pie is doing a lot of work to kind of throw us out onto different social media platforms. And I just, if I can get to 100K subscribers, I think I could just give up and die then. I've had a couple of kids. I've got multiple sclerosis, so I'm not getting any fitter. I can't play the sports I used to play. I can't play any sports really. And so, 100K supporters, and then honestly, I won't just fall down and die. Honestly, I will keep going. But I think I would have won life then, and everything would just be, I'd do things with an even bigger smile on my face. Anyway, that's enough rubbish from me. Take care, everybody. I really do appreciate you all, and I love the fact that you have a good, fruitful time in the chat. So that is really cool. And I'm happy to see you get along there. So yeah, I was going to say, now they're going to say, don't get him to 100K. Damn. Anyway, thanks to the mods for helping out. Thanks, everyone. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pepperoonies. Slava Ukraini.